For our next segment, we're going to break some new ground. I'm actually very excited on a few fronts. First of all, as you know, on none of the above, we don't take positions on issues, and we're more focused on process and solutions from a process perspective. But there are a couple of issues that are very prevalent in our political world today that really drive the dysfunction on one end or are the result of dysfunction on the other end in polarization. So we're going to start a segment today. We're going to call it our hot topics, and periodically we're going to pick a topic, and again, we're not going to take sides on the topic, but we're going to talk about it in the context of dysfunction and polarization and try and figure out why particular topics get affected more than others in the political spectrum. So that's one new test for us today. Another new test is we're going to branch out and see if we can do multiple Skype interviews all at once. This is a new technology that Skype is offering, and we haven't tried it before, so bear with us, and hopefully we've figured out how to make that one work. And last and not least, and very exciting, as you know, we are very excited to work with Ballotpedia as our favorite website for political information. And the folks at Ballotpedia have developed a new concept which is called PolicyPedia. So today we're going to actually speak with the PolicyPedia team to introduce our first hot topic. And our first hot topic is going to be pensions. Many of you probably find pensions to be a very boring topic in and of itself. For those of you on a pension, you just want the check to show up at the end of the month and you don't want to know how it got there or why it got there. But from the public perspective, and when we're in the world of dysfunction, I think you're going to find from today and our other interviews that the world of public pensions is really in significant disarray. Financing is way off kilter, particularly in some states where they're off as much by 50% in terms of what they're predicted to have at a certain point in time and what they have now. And there's a whole other host of issues that revolve around pensions that are playing out in this dysfunctional political world. So with that, we're going to move to our Ballotpedia All-Star team, and we're going to let them introduce themselves, which is another part of our test today. If we get through all 4 introductions, we'll know that our Skype system is working well, and then we'll move on from there. So welcome, everyone. And Jeff, we'll pick on you first and see if the system's working at least.
Sure. Thanks so much, Steve, for having us on the show again. My name is Jeff Palais. I'm the Director of Strategic Projects for the Lucy Burns Institute. I've been with Ballotpedia and the Lucy Burns Institute since June 2010. And in my current role as Director of Strategic Projects, I work with new projects and external relationships and partnerships and all sorts of fun research and experimental ideas, which is never ending when it comes to the land of politics.
Great. Who do we want to pick on next? Brittany?
Sure. Hi, I'm Brittany Klingen. I am the Ballot Measure Project Director at Ballotpedia. I've been with the organization since April of 2013, and we cover all statewide ballot measures. We cover certain local ballot measures, particularly hot topic ones, including pension-related ballot measures. We are also working on building a historical database, which will cover all statewide pensions going back to 1900. So we're very excited about all of those different sub-projects within ballots.
Awesome. So we'll, I guess boy, girl, man, woman. So Josh, you're next.
Thanks, Steve. My name is Josh Altic, and I'm a staff writer for the ballot measures team. I work with Brittany. My specialty is the local ballot measures, so anything in counties or cities. And as Brittany said, we cover hot topic ballot measures, which includes the pensions. So I've spent a lot of my time looking into the specific measures that different cities and counties have tried to use to remedy their pension problems and try and save the taxpayers some money.
All right, last but not least, as they say, Karen.
Okay, hi. Nice to be with you today. I am the Director of Policypedia.
You got to say you're Karen Bradford.
Oh, I'm sorry, Karen Danford. My name's Karen Danford. I'm new Director of Policypedia, which just launched officially on June 30th. I've been with the organization, the Lucy Burns Institute, since November of 2013, building up this project, and really excited to talk to you about it today.
So let's pick on you next, Karen, because before we start the topic, I want to introduce my viewers to Policypedia, give a little background on it, and talk through how to find it on the website, and then we'll put a nice picture up while you're talking of the website, etc. So walk us through all that.
Okay, well, Policypedia is a series of encyclopedia-type articles on different topic policy areas. We are currently covering energy policy, education, state budgets, and pensions.
So I would think for the average person on the street, if you ask them to list issues of importance to them, education and budget, which are two of your topics, would be foremost in pretty much everybody's minds, and people usually vote their pocketbook and they vote on education. Energy policy obviously has been around for a long time with fracking, etc. Very hot topic. But then all of a sudden you have this fourth category, pensions. I don't think many people think of pensions as a hot topic, and I mean, I know I do because I kind of live in this world, but I just throw it out to the group here. How was it that you came to make pensions, you know, the fourth policy topic, and how did that come to your attention? Jeff, you want to answer or pick on someone?
Yeah, that's a great question, Steve. You know, I think that pensions really came into the limelight right after the recession, you know, 2009, 2010. It's kind of the perfect storm of when you had a lot of public employees starting to retire and collecting on some of those pension benefits. And suddenly the pension investments that the state and local governments had made wasn't doing as well as it had been in the years past. A little known fact about most pension funds are that they are investments in the stock market just like any other investment is, just like a 401k. And state and local governments, when they do their budgets, when they plan their pension funds out, they had most of the time been expecting somewhere between a 7 and an 8% return on those investments year to year. That's an enormously optimistic estimate. I think most people would be thrilled to get 7 to 8% rate of return in their, you know, their own 401ks and their own investments. So what happened is when the recession occurred and, you know, suddenly the investments were not getting 7 and 8% anymore, this took a huge hit on budgets. So, you know, just a simple example would be from the state of Illinois, when the Illinois teachers retirement system voted to lower its rate of return from 8.5% to 8%, which is just a small 0.5%. That change increases the state's requirement for how much money it is required to put into the pension account from 3.07 billion to a little more than 3.33 billion. So essentially, this little
that's
change
per year?
increased the budget by $30 million.
That's per year, the number you were talking about, the increase.
I'm sorry?
That was a per year contribution you're talking about?
Yeah,
the increase?
per year contribution. And so what's kind of a little known fact about pensions and what I'm sort of getting at is the pensions affect the budget immensely. And, you know, the ever-changing marketplace now as a result of the recession and the laws that have been changed and the kind of more conservative investments that most states are taking really impacts how the budget is crafted. Where they're either going to have to take away from existing services or increase taxes because somehow the pension obligations have to be met. And what you're seeing in most recent years, case in point being Detroit and its bankruptcy, are that the city and state governments are having a really hard time of making ends meet. So there's kind of a climactic point coming.
Am I understanding, again, anyone jump in here, is now that you've done some research on this, you've defined this as roughly a $4 trillion problem?
Yeah, that's right. I think, you know, depending on which, you know, analysis you go to, and, you know, there are a lot of different groups that have done studies, but if you use the market rate of about 3.5% as a rate of return, there are more than $4 trillion in unfunded liabilities at the state and local level with pensions.
So if someone goes to the PolicyPedia site, do you give them ranges of solutions based upon rate of return estimates, or have you just focused on 3% and picked one number for your analysis?
Yeah, we've picked a couple of different numbers. So we typically try to report on a variety of different estimates from either, you know, analysis organizations, but also the state reports that they are required to release each year. And using those state reports, even the funding levels are pretty low. It's typically been a best practice, I guess you could say, from experts in the industry that you should have your pension level funded at least 80%. And as of the most recent set of data, only 12 states are actually funded to that level. So the bulk of the states then are not meeting these, you know, sound fiscal investments with their pension funds.
Now, you mentioned the fact that the investment targets, the rate of return, may be part of the problem here, that the estimates were too ambitious and the targets weren't met. You know, we had this great recession. But we've done some other interviewing, and we have some other, you know, guests are going to be on other shows. And what we're hearing is rate of return is really only part of the problem. That in some, if not all, instances, the legislature, whoever was the body at the time, deliberately underfunded in a particular year. They knew they had a certain obligation, they just didn't fund that obligation. We're also hearing that states have used gimmickry for early retirement and buy-in, buy-out, depending upon your terminology, and those estimates have not always been accurate. One of our guests that we're going to have is Representative Elaine Neckwitz from Illinois. She shocked me by telling me that Illinois historically did not even do an actuarial determination when the legislature made pension votes. So the reason I'm asking you this is when you guys are doing your research, and again, figure out who wants to jump in on this, what issues are you looking at in terms of how we got here? How have you broken out that discussion?
Yeah, I think I could feel that one also. In terms of how we got here, that's a really interesting and really complicated question, as you point out. And I think you're right. You know, rate of return is only a small piece of the puzzle. Much like any other policy area, it's an extremely complicated factor, and it's extremely complicated what has, you know, caused this system to be so broken as you described it. We are trying to look through valuation reports to sort of figure that out, but I should point out a little bit here, and Karen might be able to do this as well. What we're trying to balance over at PolicyPedia and Ballotpedia is not so much as conducting the original research, but finding the really good, pertinent research that's out there and bringing that sort of down to a simple level for voters to understand. The challenge so far has been, with respect to pensions, I think like you say, Steve, it's kind of a new area. There's not a lot that's been done on it yet. I mean, there is good research, but it's certainly not readily available to everyone. So a lot of what we've been trying to do is just sort of set a baseline of, okay, what are the historical funding levels? And then next year, we hope to be able to identify some of those historical trends about how did we get there, which states didn't meet their ARC, which is the annual required contribution, which states sort of shifted money around, and try to identify that and present it to our voters.
Yeah, and so Karen, I'm going to pick on you for my next question. It's an offshoot of what I was just talking to Jeff about. When you try and set up a research project like this, and you know you've got this PolicyPedia group, how difficult is it to try and take 50 different states and condense how they've reported on an issue to make that uniform? How challenging has that been?
Well, that's a very good question, and it's one that we deal with daily, I will say. So it depends on the area, policy area. So in education, for instance, you go to the government site. You go to, by the way, there are many education statistic reporting agencies. And the states report to the federal government. The federal government collects all of that, and then researchers and policy experts, they look at all that data. So the hard part there is you have a real lag, a time lag in the numbers. So, for instance, if somebody goes to our pages, our state pages on pensions, they're going to see numbers there for 2011, which was the year that. The last reporting year, that was as of about 4 months ago when these pages were written. There's now data available for 2012 that was just revised and updated at the end of 2013. So you can see what I'm getting at. This information takes time to be published and then to be digested.
At some point, from either a Ballotpedia or PolicyPedia perspective, as you guys define the problem better and you get these statistical measures that are different by state, will you try to develop, let's say, the PolicyPedia template with the 20 questions you want answered, and then see if you can find someone in a state to give you that kind of uniformity? Is that a goal from your perspective?
Oh, I could answer that just briefly. I mean, ideally, when we have a larger staff, we can do that. For now, we have to rely on published statistics such as they are.
Gotcha. So there's this huge pension problem out there, maybe as much as $4 trillion or more, depending upon how you define it. And just to put that in context, our federal budget deficit is about $17 trillion, depending upon which meter you're looking at, right? This is at least 25% the size of that. Another issue people hear about, are the student loan debt crisis potential issue. I don't think the student loan debt is nearly as big as the pension, is it?
Mhm.
No.
Right. So in terms of overall debt type problems, this pension issue is probably number 2, right behind the federal deficit. Correct? All right, so a lot of people have figured this out, and we're now seeing ballot measures in a lot of states and municipalities, and we want to get to that part of the program here. So I know Brittany and Josh are going to jump in here. You started to look at these ballot measures. Tell us what you're finding and some of the more interesting measures that are out there.
Well, it's interesting because there are really only 2 notable statewide measures that address pensions this year in 2014. One of them was in California. It was spearheaded by San Jose's Mayor Chuck Reed, who was the main proponent of San Jose's 2012 Measure B, which was overwhelmingly approved by voters. I think it was 69% approved. So he tried this year to get a statewide measure on the ballot, and unfortunately, because of a disagreement over the ballot title, he decided to withdraw the measure, and he's going to try again in 2016 to get it on the ballot. This is not the first time this has happened. California Attorney General Kamala Harris has drawn a lot of fire for the ballot titles and ballot summaries that she gives specifically to pension-related measures. A group in 2012 attempted to get a pension reform measure on the ballot and withdrew it because of the title she assigned it. So Chuck Reed ran into the same issue this year. The other statewide pension measure for 2014 could potentially still be on the ballot, though it's looking less and less likely. That would be in New Jersey, and that would be if the legislature chooses to refer it to the ballot. That measure seeks to require that any constitutional amendment that addresses enhanced pension benefits identify a specific funding source. So the purpose there is to try to avoid these unfunded liabilities by identifying a funding source before anything is approved. But again, there's a good chance that will not make the ballot this year. So what we've seen is there have been statewide attempts to get these issues before voters. And if San Jose and San Diego are any indication, voters do want pension reform. And I think that voters should be able to, speak on this issue since it affects them. So the biggest issue at the statewide level has been getting these measures before voters in the first place. That is not the case at the local level. Josh can speak more to this, but there have been multiple attempts and also successful measures that have been put before voters. That, I think, is a matter of, when cities have to start cutting back on public safety and public works in order to put that money toward unfunded pension liabilities, people notice that. It's very, very evident to the residents. So that may be one reason why there have been far more local ballot measures that address this than statewide ones.
Well, I think states have the same pressure, and as we define this as a $4 trillion problem, but in terms of budgeting 101, I've talked in other shows, the federal government can print money. So at some point in time, they can always print their way out, but states can't. States don't print money, and they have to have balanced budgets. Municipalities can't print money, they have to have balanced budgets. So if all of a sudden you wake up one day and your pension obligation is significantly higher than you thought it was, at the state level, Brittany, the choice may be, are we, funding education this year, pensions, or at the local level for Josh, as you said, are we going to hire more policemen this year or do the pension? So are any of the ballot measures focusing on that tension between spending, or are they looking at more of a macro level?
Go ahead, Josh, and then you can field that one.
Yeah, well, just with regard to local measures, just sort of highlight what Jeff was saying before and what Brittany was saying. What I've been able to see with my research on local measures is the effect. Knowing the cause is a little harder, but what we've seen, just taking, for example, Phoenix and Ventura County, two different states, Arizona and California, they both have somewhat similar measures they're trying to put before voters because they're dealing with a similar problem. In Phoenix, in 2003, the city paid $35 million towards pensions. They saw in 2013 that payment had to be $253 million. The problem with that is they didn't actually gain any ground by increasing their payment by over $200 million. Because for the pension to work out, for the investments to actually yield enough money to fund the retirement for their city employees, there needs to be money in the pension system to invest. The system wasn't executed in such a way that that money was there. So what they've seen is a huge increase in the annual pension payment that's due without any real ground being made with regard to establishing a fund. So once that was realized, groups of people who are advocating for pension reform put an initiative on the ballot that would drastically alter the pension system, which right now is what is called a defined benefit program, in which the employees are guaranteed a certain payment. And if that payment's not met by the investment or the return on the investment, the taxpayers are left to kind of uphold the end of the deal, and they're stuck with the big bill at the end of the day. So this measure would change that so that city employees would also have kind of more private sector-like pension plans, like a 401k, in which their pensions depend on what they put into the program and how investments do, rather than a certain rate being guaranteed. Likewise, in Ventura, they're doing the same thing. They're trying to switch over the system for the new hires to this what's called a defined contribution, or the kind of 401k style plan. What they found, though, while it's much easier to get a local initiative on the ballot because the signatures that you need to collect are just much fewer than on a statewide measure that could cost millions of dollars to run. They're able to get them on the ballot usually, but they are seeing a lot of resistance from different groups, especially unions, and, for example, CalPERS in California, that don't want to see these changes happening. They don't want to see the money taken out of the big funds and put into individually owned accounts. What you see in California right now with Ventura County, which is which is a measure that's seeking the November ballot, is CalPERS is suing the county for putting the measure on the ballot because they're basically arguing that the county cannot change pensions on a local level. So that is why people are seeking a statewide change. But in the meantime, these measures are sort of pioneering in a new direction. To drastically alter local pensions is a new area entirely for them. So what we're going to be seeing is court cases and measures that really define how pension reform is going to go forward in the future, whether counties will even be able to change their pensions or not. So,
and of course, one of the issues that's come up now, and I think it's playing out in Detroit, is that at least at the municipal level, one of the considerations may be to file for bankruptcy as an alternative. Yeah. So we'll see how that plays out. And let me ask if any of you have seen this yet. And I know we're pretty early in the game here on ballot measures. It seems that the side who has their pension benefits at risk or could be at risk, they're going to turn out. And we've talked about turnout before and who's behind an issue. What are your predictions in terms of the other side of this equation? I mean, it's hard to get the message across, hey guys, we're broke, come and vote so we can be unbroke. How do you see that messaging on that side of the issue? Anybody got enough insight yet into where that's going?
Well, one thing that we noticed, so in June of 2012, both San Diego and San Jose had local pension reform measures on the ballot, and the public employees, the unions, so the people whose benefits were on the line, if you want to call it that, they ran aggressive campaigns. they were very involved leading up to the election, trying, protesting and trying to get the word out. I can't speak to the turnout numbers for those measures, but those were both overwhelmingly approved, the pension reform was. So even if you do assume the people whose pensions and benefits were at stake, even if there was a high turnout, the measures were still overwhelmingly approved. So I think that voters, taxpayers, people are starting to realize that this is a big issue and that it's going to affect them, if these pensions continue on. So it's probably still too early at this point to speak in definite terms about turnout, but I think that voters are starting to wake up to this issue and understand it more.
And I think, again, I don't want to tell you guys how to do your business. Some of these turnout aspects and how the issue gets sold will probably be, interesting political phenomenon. Whether you can quantify that or not, I don't know. As always, we have so much to cover when we're talking to you guys, and we always run out of time. Real quickly, Karen, one more time, tell everybody how they can find PolicyPedia and how they can drill in and get the information on the pension issue.
So you can come in through Google, through Ballotpedia portal, or just by typing in policypedia.org.
Well, thank you, guys. You were great today. My Ballotpedia All-Stars never let me down. We're like the Harlem Globetrotters. We win every time. And thanks for working with us and your patience today on our new technology test. I think we got all 4 of you on the screen at one time. So, Bill O'Reilly's going to get nervous now. So,
Right.
hopefully in
Thanks
about 6 months after the election, and you guys get your arms around this, we can maybe come back and renew our findings and have another discussion. Thanks so much, everybody.
Let's do that, yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.